Looked shocked, realizing the technology Newton's friend had on him. We are holding him hostage. We will only return him if you let us leave the blueprints to the technology he has had on him, said the Russian evilly. Newton smiled and said, if you don't take me to my friend, I'll have to use my technology on you. The Russians looked scared. Then a KGB agent pointed Storm's phaser at Newton and said, I know how to use this, so you had better do what we ask. You don't know why it works, but we can learn. But we can learn, said the officer, pointing the gun at Newton's face. Now, where are the blueprints to this? Where are the blueprints to this? Newton felt himself growing more angry by the second. He felt like inflicting a lot of injuries on him, but at the same time didn't want to change time. I don't know where I don't have the blueprints. I don't know the blueprints, said Newton, telling the truth. Well, we will still have one prisoner to make US give up blueprints. And with that, he pressed the button. Newton quickly leaped to the side when he saw the missiles in the man's finger. When he saw the muscles in the man's finger flinch, causing the beam to miss him and eat away at the wall, killing 5 Russians in the other room. Missed me, smiled Newton. The Russian looked scared. He tried for Newton again. No, comrade, shouted the comrade when the beam began to cut the 4 others in the room into 2 separate parts. Newton bounced up and kicked the Russian in the chest, knocking him up against the wall. Everyone was now laying dead on the floor, dead or dying on the floor from Storm's phaser. The Russian with the phaser held the phaser 5 feet away from Newton. The officer had a look of horror on his face. What are you? What are you? Asked the frightened Russian. I'm from your future, said Newton. The Russian KGB officer screamed when he saw the United Federation of Planets on Newton's spacesuit. To him, it meant that Russia had failed in its goal of conquering the world. Newton suddenly leaped to the side, making the officer miss again, then grabbed the phaser away from him. The whole room was filled with choking black smoke from the phaser beam, destroying the walls of the building. The entire building began to creak and crack. Newton quickly asked the Russian, Where are the other devils? He wouldn't tell him. Newton quickly flew up off the floor and crashed up through the building right as the building collapsed into a thundering pile of dust and debris. Newton then jumped down into the street and noticed that the military in Moscow was alerted. Newton quickly flew off the ground and hid in a basement of an old rustic building. Borsky got the news about the collapse of the building and asked for what caused it. No one knew what to tell him. Is it the American? Asked Borsky. A KGB agent told Borsky that it wasn't Sergeant Storm because Storm was being tortured in a basement somewhere in Moscow. Then who? Asked Borsky. Another Amerikansky, Borsky, said the agent. Are you going to destroy America now? Borsky didn't know what to say. He responded with, This is not like America to have spies so dangerous in Soviet Union. Maybe they are not Americans? Geese? Spy who calls himself Storm says that he is from future. He says that America is going to destroy Soviet Union 40 years from now, when future Soviet leaders threaten to shut off Alaskan oil to US. Borsky laughed when the agent told him that. America would never press button on Soviet Union. 40 years from now, we will outnumber America 20-1 in weapons strategy. He says that America beat Soviet Union with a new type of weapon he had on him, called phaser and photon torpedo. Borsky looked shocked. He didn't know how to respond. Prime Minister Borsky, don't you think we should destroy US now before US develops that weapon? You know US spy is telling truth. How you know US spy is telling truth? Asked Borsky. Since single fact that he was carrying such simple fact that he was carrying such terrific weapons on him proves that he is from future, or it is like, or it at least from another planet. You know as well as I that US has no technology as great as that. I say destroy US. Destroy it now. Our future will become reality, and Soviet Union will be destroyed. Borsky looked frightened, saying, but we can't destroy US now. It is still too strong, and would destroy most of Soviet Union now. Not only that, but we need more of US grain and workers, or workers will starve in our underground city. Then what are you going to do? Then what are you going to do, Prime Minister Borsky? Asked his angry KGB officer. Speed up completion of grain storage. Then take chance that US won't press button on Soviet Union. Then we press button on United States. On USA, said a grave sounding Borsky. And in a back lot in Moscow, Newton was dressed up like a KGB agent. He killed the agents and was now working. He killed the agent and was now asking fellow agents where the American was. The agents wanted to know why he wanted to know. Then they noticed that Newton was wearing his spacesuit under the KGB officer's clothes and went for their guns to shoot him. Newton pulled out his phaser and pressed the button, twirling in a circle at the same time. The 5 questioning agents fell to the ground, all steamy and bubbling, cut in half. Newton made a yell and saw another officer in the distance going for his gun. Newton fired his phaser and disintegrated him. Oh no, shouted Newton, realizing he was changing time. But he had to get Storm back, or that would change time also. Newton took off running down through back alleys and other places, trying to keep from being seen. He then flew off the ground and crashed down through the roof of the Kremlin, shouting, "Where is Storm?" Newton quickly disintegrated anyone who had a gun or machine gun on him. "Where is Storm?" asked Newton again. He didn't realize it, but Newton was now responsible for the deaths of 25 Soviets. The news broke out all over the world that an American was threatening the Kremlin with a powerful weapon, demanding the whereabouts of a friend. Borsky walked up to Newton with a frightened look on his face and asked, "Who are you? Who are you?" "You just tell me where my comrade is," asked Newton, disguising his voice and hiding his face from the camera in case the Black Newton was watching. He is in Gorky," said Borsky. "Take me to him," demanded Newton. A few hours later, Newton was taken to Storm's prison cell. Storm was laying on the floor of a dark, cramped, old, cold cell with rats gnawing at him. Newton, with rats crawling on him. Newton walked up to Storm and asked, "Storm, have they been treating you okay?" "Yes, fine," said a voice that didn't sound like Storm's. "Storm, I didn't see your lips move, and why the..." "I said, yes, fine. Why the Russian accent?" I said yes, fine. Newton touched Storm. Storm fell over on his back. He was dead for a few hours now. And some rats had eaten out his eyes. No! Shouted Newton. Suddenly, some Russians who were hiding in the ceiling crashed down through the ceiling and began shooting their machine guns at Newton. All 5 soldiers blasted away at Newton's face, stomach, and chest, pushing Newton back 10 feet up against the wall. Newton managed to disintegrate 3 of the soldiers, but some soldiers down the hall opened fire and pushed Newton down the hallway, backing him up against the wall 50 feet away. When they quit firing, Newton slid down the bullet-ridden wall and fell on his face with his yellow mutated blood flowing out of him. His artificial arms and legs were all dented, and his fingers were all dislocated with electrical sparks shooting out of them. Newton's phaser was making a beeping sound. As a bullet had hit it, making it smoke and hum. A soldier walked up to Newton and kicked Newton onto his back. Everyone was shocked to see that Newton just looked beat up and bruised from the gunfire. How could a man take so many rounds and still look human? Asked a shocked soldier. Bulletproof vesty? Asked another man. Borsky came down the hallway laughing. He smiled and said, "Good job. For this you may find yourself Prime Minister. Prime Minister. Take this monstrous corpse and put it in with other one. It will teach other one to not mess around with Soviet Union." They're both dead, said the soldier. Very good. That will teach United States that even technology can't save them from Soviet Union. Maybe it will even get them to reduce more missiles. What you wish we to do with corpses? Asked another soldier. Take pictures, then burn corpses. By the way, how did Storm Spy die? Asked Borsky to the torturer. I hit him too hard on Hedsky, smiled the torturer. You have got to be more careful, Ivan. Who knows? They might have really been from future, and you might have destroyed something that we could have really used, said Borsky. 2 days later, Newton astounded the Soviet leaders by coming back to life. Borsky and several guards with powerful machine guns showed up at Newton's cell. Borsky and all who witnessed that Newton was still alive were astounded. Although Newton was alive, he didn't move. He just sat in the corner of the cell with his legs crossed and his hands over his face. He never answered Borsky's questions. Borsky became furious that he wasn't getting anything out of Newton, so he sent Newton with bazookas pointed at him to a gulag where they tortured political prisoners to death. One of the guards had Newton and Storm's phasers pointed at him. A day later, Newton was chained to a metal cage where the Russians began throwing hundreds of bolts through Newton's body, trying to get him to talk. Newton acted like the electricity was killing him, and he acted unconscious to make them stop. He had to, because the electricity was making his artificial limbs so powerful from each blast of electricity that they were on the brink of overloading. Several hours after the latest jolt, Newton was thrown into a little cramped room with a bunch of political prisoners, who were forced not to say anything, but were told to only look at a toilet that had a horrible stench. Newton just sat there looking at the toilet and feeling miserable. The Russians and the Gulag wasn't bothering him. It was the fact that his longtime friend and chief engineer of Mutania was dead. Why Why, was all Newton could say. Newton flashed back to the time Mason told him how a man in Arizona told him that he used to play with dolls of Major Matt Mason and Doug Davis, Callisto, Jeff Long, and Sergeant Storm. Newton thought back to how he tried to explain the coincidences of telling his crew and Mason that it was probably because God loved him and his crew so much that he made futuristic space dolls of him back in the 1960s before he and his crew were ever born. And that this meant that he and his crew were important. But now that Storm was dead, and in such a meaningless way, he didn't know what to think. And nothing made sense. Now nothing made sense. It must have just been a fantastic coincidence is all, he thought to himself. An hour later, Newton started getting tired of looking at the toilet. He got up, stretched his incredibly powerful artificial limbs, then began walking over to the door. "No," whispered one of the prisoners, frighteningly, realizing that Newton's actions could cost them a meal. Newton turned to them and had a slightly insane look on his face, saying, "You know, I just lost a very valuable and wonderful friend, and now I think I'm living in an insane, absurd, meaningless life. I think I'm living in some meaningless, absurd void. I used to be afraid that if I ever did anything exciting in your time, something horrible would happen. Well," suddenly a guard began knocking on the bars of the cell, shouting, "No food for cell 89. Hearing that made the prisoners cry. Newton smiled and said, "Maybe everything is just illusion? Maybe my friend isn't dead? Well, everything is probably an illusion, and you are all probably figments of my imagination also." The guard began knocking on the door louder, telling Newton to shut up, making Newton smile and wildly saying, "You know, even though you are all probably something I dreamt up, or God dreamt up, or whatever, you don't seem very happy. And the robots that are keeping you here, robots that are parading around the 20th century Russia, Soviet guards seem to be causing you grief. How about it if I tear down the door, kill the guard, take his machine gun and kill the next guard with it, give his machine gun to you, and just keep on killing guards until everyone is free from the prison?" Everyone looked violently angry at Newton for talking like a crazy man and keeping them from eating. They stared angrily at him until they saw Newton walk over to the door and put his hand on one of the thick steel bars and start to put pressure on it. Everyone's eyes began to widen with amazement when Newton started bending the bar like it was wet modeling clay. The bar began to whine and creak loudly as Newton bent it. The noise attracted the guard. When he came over to see what Newton was doing, Newton quickly reached out, grabbed his throat, and pulled his throat through the bars, leaving his head outside the door. Newton had the guard's neck in his hand and turned to the shocked prisoners and said, "Huh, this looks real." Newton then reached around all the bars and snapped them all like straws. But then he then pressed a lever down, opening the door. "You're free," he said with a smile to the political prisoners. Newton picked up the dead guard's machine gun and then said, "It's about time Russia had another little revolution, don't you think?" Everyone cheered, thinking Newton was some angel sent from heaven. Newton then walked down the hall with the prisoners following him. As Newton walked down the hallway, he pulled off the doors to other cells, then sent the prisoners behind the doors. Then said to the prisoners behind the doors, all cramped up in the hot, sneaky cells, "You are free. Follow me." Newton then floated off the ground and turned the corner. Every guard that saw him flying down the hallway toward him couldn't believe their eyes. So shocked were they to see Newton floating quickly toward them that, with an insane, happy smile on his face, froze them in terror, making it easy for Newton to sink his fist in their skulls. A few minutes later, and 20 guards were dead, and 20 prisoners were free, were armed. The 23rd guard didn't freeze when he saw Newton coming, and he went for his machine gun, causing Newton to kill him with his. The sound of the machine gun fire alerted all the other guards, but by that time it was too late. Newton had freed 200 prisoners, and 25 had guns. After all the guards were dead, and no one was around to threaten the political prisoners, Newton kicked down the doors of the gate and then flew up into the sky. When he landed, he stood out on the outskirts of Moscow smiling. In the Kremlin, Borsky got the report that the immortal Newton had gotten loose from the prison, killed all the guards, and freed all the political prisoners. Hearing that caused Borsky to alert the military again. Newton was then seen walking down a road getting closer to the heart of Moscow. Tanks, jeeps, and attack helicopters flew into the area to defend the city from Newton and the political prisoners. "He must be an alien," shouted frightened Borsky. A helicopter zeroed in on Newton and began firing its machine guns at Newton. Newton quickly flew off the ground and then flew around the helicopter, making the Russians realize how Newton got to Moscow so quickly. It can fly, shouted a terrified helicopter pilot. Newton suddenly flew at the helicopter and crashed down the walls. He threw all the Russians out except for the pilot. Newton told the pilot in Russian to take him to Borsky. Since Newton spoke Russian so well to him, he didn't think he was an American after all. And he took Newton to the Kremlin. Seeing that the helicopter with Newton was flying toward the Kremlin, the tanks and military pointed their weapons at it. Seeing that they were going to shoot it down, Newton started shooting the helicopter anti-tank missiles at the tanks, destroying 6 tanks. The other tanks fired and destroyed the helicopter with one of their missiles. Before the helicopter crashed, Newton flew out of it and flew with his might into the Kremlin, with the missiles from tanks destroying the walls of the famous building. Borsky screamed to realize that Newton was now in his palace and sent guards out to protect him, but Newton had one of his machine guns from the helicopter and wiped out all of Borsky's guards. Newton captured one of the guards and asked where Borsky was. The guard told him when Newton crushed his arm. Newton then crashed down the door to Borsky's secret room and found Borsky hiding under his bed. Newton kicked the bed off of him, then shouted, "Where are the communicators, phasers, and